I'm Edwin Warfield, the publisher of CityBiz, and I'm honored today to interview Michael Maglin, who is the CEO of CraniUS. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Edwin. Great to be here.
CraniUS is an R&D company focused on diagnostics and treatments for patients with chronic brain diseases. Can you explain the NeuroPASS technology?
That's a great question, Edwin. I think before we get into the actual technology itself, it's important to understand the problem we're looking to solve. And I know that we've spoken about this before, but really the big, piece of information that is important for consumers and for the end patient to understand is the challenge we've seen out there with something called the blood-brain barrier. And this was first really coined in the late 1880s to describe, for a layperson, for lack of a better term, it's an extra layer of security that our bodies have developed over thousands of years to protect, which in essence is one of the most important organs of the body, the brain. And that's a positive, right? But the challenge is what the blood-brain barrier does is it keeps toxins away from our brain. And when you think about therapeutics or medicines, right, they do have some level of toxins in them. So when you think about the delivery of medicine through pill form or through the bloodstream, the challenge is it's not getting through the blood-brain barrier and getting to the tissue where disease lives. So we've had so many challenges over the last 50 years that we've overcome in other organs of the body. And there's been great progress. But the brain has been a point of frustration. And really the blood-brain barrier is the reason for that. So back about 25 years ago, the great news is we started to make progress because we started to think about the problem differently. And Dr. Oldfield at the National Institute of Health in Bethesda said, instead of trying to drive a Mack truck through the blood-brain barrier, meaning increasing dosages and concentrations of medicine and hoping that a little bit actually gets through to the area that needs treated, how do we fly directly to the brain? How do we actually deliver medicine directly to the brain? And he was able to establish what is called convection-enhanced delivery. And really to think about what that means, it's using catheters and pumps to drive a slow flow of medicine delivery into the brain, directly into the brain. And this was tremendous progress because it was a new way to look at the problem. The challenge that he would ran into and so many that has followed him is how do you do it chronically over time? You can't have a patient hooked up to an IV pole for days on end, right? So how do you actually think about a remote way to deliver medicine chronically over a long period of time? And that is what the NeuroPASS technology is focused on, Edwin. It is a fully implantable device that is under the skin that is invisible. You won't be able to see or understand that somebody has this in their scalp area. And what we're doing here is it is refillable and is also wirelessly rechargeable. So we can actually deliver medicine over long periods of time. So we're thinking not just here about days, but weeks, months, years, and that this would be embedded and you're continuing to treat the disease over a long period of time. So therein is the breakthrough technology that is the NeuroPASS device.
And is it a device as well as the medication?
That is correct. So, if you think about our level of expertise at CraniUS, we are a device company. We are about finding a way to deliver the drug to the area of the brain that needs it, in the tissue area. And so that is our focus and our expertise. In saying all of that, it takes two to tango here, right? You actually need a drug that will be delivered directly to the white matter of the brain to treat the disease. So this will take partnerships with pharma companies that are out there and exist today that they believe have drugs that can be very effective to treat diseases like GBM, which is glioblastoma, which is malignant brain tumors, thinking about Parkinson's, thinking about Alzheimer's. We've had so many challenges because of the blood-brain barrier and actually getting effective treatment because we can't get the medicine directly to the brain. NeuroPASS actually changes the game there, and we believe that this will allow for not only new development, but drugs that are out there that are on the shelves that haven't been able to bypass the blood-brain barrier, the opportunity to be revived because we now have a device that can deliver the medicine.
Interesting. So can you tell us about Dr. Chad Gordon and the role he's playing in developing the technology?
Absolutely. Dr. Gordon is a true innovator in this space. A little bit of background on Dr. Gordon. He's actually classically trained as a plastic surgeon. He started at the Cleveland Clinic and then did a fellowship at Harvard and Mass General. He has since come to Johns Hopkins, and for him, he's had the opportunity to work with some of the greatest neurosurgeons in the world. And for him, I think the interesting thing is he looked at it, he had a different perspective, right? Neurosurgeons are thinking about the modulation and the treatment of disease in the brain. Dr. Gordon was coming from a completely different angle. He was thinking as a plastic surgeon, how do we think about the physical outcomes and the reconstructive outcomes of surgeries that are happening in the neuro space? And so what he found is many times after surgeries, 3 to 6 months down the line, that some of these patients were having, dents in their side of their head or issues or concerns, because in a lot of cases when you have neurosurgery, you actually have to have a skull implant put in to account for bone loss. Now, that is important and that is great from a reconstructive angle. The traditional implants that have been out there for decades accounted for bone loss, which is about 4 to 5 millimeters of thickness. But he was seeing after 3 to 6 months that patients really on the side of their head where there's fat and muscle, degradation there. So he was starting to actually see atrophy and dents in the side of patients' heads. So he basically created an enhanced version of the traditional cranial implant, accounting for not just the bone loss, but the muscle and fat loss. And that was an important advancement as you think about just the physical appearance of patients, right, who are going on a first date, who are going in a job interview. However, the big idea that Dr. Gordon had in his head is, hey, now I actually have real estate, not just to think about reconstruction, but how do I help neurosurgeons in treatment of brain disease? So over the last several years, Dr. Gordon has completed 3 first-in-human surgeries, which worked on embedding technology that actually helped in modulation for some of these patients. And the holy grail for him has always been, how do I solve the challenge of the blood-brain barrier? How do I figure out how to deliver medicine directly to the brain over long periods of time? And so this last 10 years has really been chapters of a book leading up to the holy grail, which is medicine delivery through the NeuroPASS device.
It's very exciting where you guys are headed. Your career included a recent stint at Under Armour as vice president of North America e-commerce. Can you highlight provide some highlights from your career?
Yes, absolutely. I'll take it back a little bit. I grew up in Pittsburgh in a family of mostly entrepreneurs with different levels of success. I've always had a little of the entrepreneurial bug in me, but I've had the opportunity to work for some great Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies that have allowed me the opportunity to really build out my general management skill set. And I've had the opportunity to lead pretty much every piece of an organization outside of maybe supply chain and logistics. And it's because of those companies affording me those opportunities that I think it's really prepared me for the opportunity today, which is to take over a company like CraniUS and hopefully lead it to FDA approval down the road. In saying all of that, the last 10 years at Under Armour were really formative in that I had the opportunity the last 8 years to focus on the digital side of their business. And that was in 2 capacities. One was leading the North American e-commerce business. So it's traditionally thinking about the website and the sales for the US, Mexico, and Canada. And that was a phenomenal business and a phenomenal growth story. However, the other opportunity I had was leading our digital product team. And that included wearable technologies, right? And when you think about wearable technologies at Under Armour, that means tools that help you get better in terms of coaching. So think about embedded footwear pods that are in our shoes that tell you about your gait, your cadence, your pace, and gives you coaching tips. And so those are really important in helping to make athletes 1% better. When I thought about, the idea that Dr. Gordon, kind of shared with me, before I took the role at CraniUS, I look at the NeuroPASS as the ultimate wearable technology. And it's obviously important what we're doing at Under Armour and helping athletes better. But in this case, we're talking about challenges that we've been facing for over a century, and really thinking about impacting patients on a global level. And the opportunity to do that and truly have an impact and really add value in the lives of individuals out there that are suffering. I think, Edwin, probably everybody we know in our networks knows somebody suffering from one of these diseases, whether it's a parent, a friend, a relative. And to be able to work as part of a team to help be the conduit to solve some of these challenges is extremely important to me as I think about sort of the back half of my career at the age that I'm at.
And just as a side note, is Kay Jamison and her work on bipolar, are you guys, is that a subject that you guys are addressing?
No, not specifically. What specifically were you alluding to, Edwin?
Kay Jamison, who's sort of she's sort of the leading expert on bipolar at Hopkins, but
Yeah, we're aware of the work. Yeah, and I think that's a great point. So as we think about our device, Edwin, it's important to understand it's a platform technology, right? We are the Amazon. We're the delivery system for the drugs. We need the drug to make sure that we're actually impacting patient outcomes. We're focusing on glioblastoma to begin with. These are patients that unfortunately are facing terminal disease and terminal illnesses. But your point is valid. We have the opportunity to expand this to, brain disease and conditions beyond just the three that I mentioned. And so as you think about chronic depression and some of those other areas that are impacting patients, the opportunity exists for us to expand into those other cases. We're starting, very focused on glioblastoma. We think Alzheimer's and Parkinson's make a lot of sense for us too. But we believe over the next several years, drugs in treating other brain diseases will certainly be an opportunity for CraniUS and for our partners as we move forward.
And so what is the status of your clinical trials?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you think about, where we're at today, for us, the most important, I would say inflection point as a company for CraniUS is reaching a first in human trial. So a clinical trial, as you kind of mentioned it. The work we're doing right now is preclinical in nature, and conducting those studies on both the benchtop and with animal studies. Those are really critical in providing a proof of concept. And you may have seen recently in the news, we had a very big breakthrough study where we're able to demonstrate successful convection-enhanced delivery. And that is really important. There's very few people that have been able to demonstrate that. And convection is really building this cloud-like kind of approach to surrounding the area of disease. And to actually demonstrate and prove that was a big step in the right direction. As you look at where we're at right now in our journey, we're about 18 months out from our first in human study, which would be the first clinical. So think about it as a phase 1 study for those who aren't as familiar with the FDA process. We're working very closely with the FDA. I mentioned this before. Because we need a drug with our device, we are being considered what is called a drug-led combination device, right? And a class 3 device, meaning life, sustaining or life-saving device. So we're talking about really in terms of impact and criticality, the top of the ladder there. So that is where we're at in our journey, really 18 months out from that first in human study, which is a key inflection point. Between now and then, it is about making some enhancements to our device to make sure that we get the longevity, the repeatability, the reliability that we need to get to that study. And then conduct what's called verification and validation study, which anybody who's going through the FDA process needs to do that. So there are a number of different tests that you need to run to make sure that you prove the viability of your product. But we are well on our way and really excited about what's been happening over the last several months as it relates to that.
And so last year you closed on almost $20 million at a Series A, which it appeared that was just mostly individual investors. Can you tell us about that financing?
Yeah, absolutely. It maybe isn't a traditional Class A as some people see it. It's a very large raise. And we certainly had the opportunity to work with and talk to a number of different institutions that are out there that are still viable, potential partners in the future. But we had so much interest, as we thought about our network, as we thought about, a lot of folks that are interested in serial investors in this space to do this privately and allowing us to continue to keep control over the company and making sure that we're, seeing the vision for Dr. Gordon and for our teams as we move forward. So if you think about that 19.42 and you think about the number, the reason for that, I talked about the complexity of the environment that we're about to enter, right? Class 3, drug-led combination device. We need an unbelievable world-class engineering team, and we've been able to build that over the last 20 months. We have a team of 18 individuals that are amazing at what they do across several disciplines in engineering, mechanical, software, hardware, quality, testing. And so that's critically important that we're making sure we're mitigating risk for our patients and for the company and its shareholders. So that's part of it. On top of it, we have these really important milestones around proof of concept and testing our device before we get to the clinical trials. And lastly, but probably just as important for a company like ours, is protecting our technology. And so we are building a very strong IP portfolio that has really been built inside the four walls of CraniUS. We have two pieces of IP around our device, both what are called our utility, or the function of the device, and also the design, so the look and feel of the device. We've already had those patents issued. We have four more that we believe will be issued by the end of 2023, which is incredibly powerful in building sort of the castle and moat around our technology, which is really important for our shareholders. And we believe that's going to pay off dividends in the long run for us and for our partners that get involved in what we're trying to accomplish.
And so what's next on the roadmap?
Yeah, so I think we mentioned it before. It's continuing to build out our portfolio and protecting our IP. It's really what we would call a design freeze in the FDA process. It's enhancing and locking our device for final testing, that verification and validation testing. And then for us, with working with the FDA, and we had our first meeting with the FDA device side, which happened in this past January. And we have an upcoming meeting with the FDA drug side, because both sides need to be involved. And where you need to go is once you finish the testing, the verification and validation testing in 2024, you apply for what is called an IND, which is essentially the approval to move forward with your phase 1 clinical study, which we believe will happen in early 2025. So those are the key steps that we have in front of us. Certainly, we have a lot of work in front of us, but we've accomplished so much over the last 20 months, and I can't give enough credit to the team that we've hired of unbelievable engineers on our side.
Well, Michael, it's a very exciting story, and I want to thank you for sharing it with us. It's an important testament to the vitality and entrepreneurialism that is in the Baltimore technology community. So thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Edwin. Appreciate it.